Hey everyone, I'm Charles Kleinschmidt. I work with Bell McCoy Lighting Controls here in New Orleans, and I was brought in by the AIA of New Orleans to present HCU. And we have chosen Lutron with the help of some of the AIA members because lighting controls is always a continuing education that people ask for. So I have Carson Alsop here with Lutron, who is going to take it from here and go over illuminating our experiences with human-centric lighting.
Yeah, and we'll give folks another moment to sign on, and we'll turn it over to y'all.
Sounds great.
And a note up top, as you come into the webinar, please feel free to put your name and the name of your firm into the chat so that our presenters today can see who's in attendance. Our attendees, y'all are going to be on mute, so if you do want to contribute to the presentation, please feel free to include any questions in the chat or the Q&A function. We'll have a moment at the end for answering any Q&As that we receive. And if you do run into any technical issues over the course of the webinar, you've received an email with a call-in number. So just call into there to rejoin the webinar. We are a small team, so please use that phone number if you need to check in. And make sure that you send your name and AIA number to Lauren at aineworleans.org in order to get credit for attending this course. And here we have Carson Alsop. Charles, would you like to read her bio for us?
Yeah, Carson's been with Lutron for 4 years, covers commercial projects for the South Central region. She's based out of Houston, Texas. Her background's in environmental engineering. She regularly works with Bell McCoy to call on architects, interior designers, lighting designers, engineers, contractors. She's gone above and beyond what's listed here. I've worked with her for a few years and gotten to know her very well. I am located here in New Orleans, so I would be a local contact as far as Lutron, but I'll lean on Carson every day as well. So Carson is going to take us from here. So Carson Alsop with Lutron.
Thanks. I feel like there should have been a whole round of applause for that introduction. Thank you, Charles. Great job. Really excited to be here with you guys today. I know it's been a trying time for everybody. It's a very weird world we're all living in at the moment. So we definitely appreciate the time, and we're excited to see if you guys have any questions and to share all this new information with y'all on human-centric lighting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All righty. So as an added benefit, I guess, we do have a CEU registration tool available to you as well. And I don't know, Aaron or Lauren, if y'all want to comment on if they even need to do this, but I did not ask earlier. We do have a lutron.com/sign-me-up. You'll enter this code POWER9101. And if you put your AIA number in there, we will automatically report your credits back to AIA. We usually do that every Friday, and this code closes next Monday. So they wouldn't appear on your account until next Friday, but that may not be necessary if you send it in to Aaron.
Yeah, we can handle that on our end. We've got a list of attendees. So.
Okay, perfect. So you can ignore this slide then. That's great. All right, so your Lutron team in Louisiana. Charles, of course, just introduced himself and me, which I very much appreciate. At Bell McCoy, they're our local rep agency, and they can help you with anything your heart can desire as far as lighting goes. And then I cover the South Central region. So I do live in Houston, but cover Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama as well. So we're both here as a resource to you. Please feel free to reach out to the emails listed here. And you know, if you have any questions or if you need anything after this presentation. All righty. So this just covers our learning objectives. You may have seen this already with the information that went out about the CEU. But basically, we're going to look at human-centric lighting and kind of discuss what it is. There's a little bit of ambiguity surrounding the term human-centric design in general. A lot of definitions floating around out there, and that's true for the lighting aspect as well. So we're really going to work to define exactly what we mean by human-centric lighting and break it down into its 4 elements. We're also going to look at some best practices and ways to design it, right? Actually explaining, hey, how can I go about designing this? What are the considerations I need to make, etc. And we're going to look at, what opportunities there are in different vertical channels, right? Whether you work on office spaces, retail, higher ed, etc. Those are all going to be different considerations for that human-centric design. And then at the end, we're kind of going to sum it up into, hey, how do we achieve this with smart technologies and just design considerations to create this experience? So without further ado, we'll just launch right in. What is human-centric lighting, right? There is no single definition, right? I mentioned before, there's a lot of ambiguity surrounding the term human-centric in general. Europe actually defines it very differently than we do here in the States. Different manufacturers will talk about it differently. And even when you look at different specifiers as well, architects, engineers, interior designers, lighting designers, you'll get different answers as to what exactly it is. And researchers are still trying to find kind of a consensus. However, we've kind of developed a more standard definition for it. And we've kind of broken it down into 4 main pillars. Overall and kind of in general, human-centric lighting is really going to be an approach to lighting design that keeps the human experience as the paramount goal, right? That's going to be our main goal of the entire job, is the human experience. So that's really what it is, and it is an opportunity for you to differentiate your services as well. More and more, we're getting focused on this human experience of lighting, human-centric design in general, and clients are really starting to ask for it. So it's another way to differentiate your business as well, to offer this approach. So I mentioned the 4 pillars. These are the 4 pillars of human-centric lighting. Going to be quality light, a connection to the outdoors, natural light, and personalized control. So we're going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail and kind of explain what we mean by each one. When we talk about quality light, we're not only talking about, the quality of the LEDs and the fixtures that we're using, which is definitely important, right? We want lighting that brings out the beauty, sets a mood, right? Enhances the space, enhances the elements of a space. This is actually the Art Institute in Chicago in this picture. And we do want to keep that in mind when it comes to the fixture or the LED light source itself. But we're also looking at with quality light is quality dimming. Life happens between on and off, is what we like to say. There are levels of lighting, and really the levels of lighting also help to create that mood and enhance that experience. So when we're talking about quality light, we're also talking about smooth, flicker-free dimming down to 0.1%, in addition to saturated color and the ability to have a very specific honed-in color across a space, right? Whether it's, we're just focusing on a 3000 Kelvin light, or if we're going deep into a saturated blue, we want to have consistency amongst all fixtures as well. So whether we're looking at static white, tunable white, and we'll go into what each of those are here in a second, but consistency across all fixtures is very important for this pillar as well. When we talk about natural light, we are talking about the natural light at the window, right? The more daylight you can have in the space, the better. There's a reason why a lot of people have always, wanted that corner office, right? If you think about executive offices, they want the corner office with the view with lots of windows. The number one thing requested by millennials in the workspace is actually access to daylight and views and access to a window. I actually am sitting in my living room right now because it has more windows than in my office, and I like to be in the natural daylight and be able to see outside. So it's something that a lot of people really want and need. So we are talking about that natural light at the window. What we're also considering is trying to bring that natural light further into the space. And what I mean by that is having your interior lights mimic the natural lighting that's happening outdoors, right? And you can hear the terms circadian lighting is thrown around a lot. And that's pretty much what this is, right? Our color temperature and our light level is very similar, if not the same, to what's happening outside. So what it does is maybe my daylight only reaches 10 or 15 feet into the space, but because my light fixtures are mimicking that lighting as well, it feels like that natural light is reaching in 30 to 40 feet into the space, right? So we're creating that illusion. And that's one of the key things about this natural light pillar is we're making it feel like even in the center of the office space or in the center of the classroom, that natural light is reaching that person. A connection to the outdoors. So I kind of already mentioned this in the natural light setting. We like to have that connection to the outdoors through a window. And one of the great things about human-centric lighting in general is that we're really trying to bring in that natural daylight, right? And the best way to do that is with shading solutions, because what we have to do is mitigate those negative things about daylight. We all live in the South. It gets hot, especially this time of year, right? We also have problems with glare control and things like that. So windows come with some problems of their own. And one of the best ways to kind of have the best of both worlds is to have an integrated automated shading solution, right? So in the background there, you can see the shades are partially down and you can still have some view through. So you can still have that connection to the outdoors, even when the shades are all the way down, trying to lock out that Louisiana heat and that glare, right? We still have that connection to the outdoors. We don't feel like we're locked into a windowless space, if you will. And adaptive and personalized control. So this is a key thing. We can talk about, oh, I want a certain amount of light output, and we get really specific on the fixtures that we want and all this other stuff, but it's equally important for human-centric design to consider, okay, what is the actual everyday end user of the space going to use to control this? And is it going to make sense to them, right? Because if it doesn't make sense to them, that suddenly becomes a very negative experience, which is what we're trying to avoid, right? We're not trying to make it more complicated. We're trying to make it simple and to a degree automated. And we're also trying to make healthier spaces as well. So with this adaptive and personalized control, we're making the controls intuitive, something that the end user will have no problem understanding. And we're also maybe adding some wireless remotes so that you have individualized control. That also creates more of a healthier environment because you don't have a centralized control that everyone is touching. And we're also looking at a degree of automation, because if the space can kind of function on its own, right, without anybody messing or touching anything, that becomes more of a touchless space and therefore a healthier space, right? So that's what we mean by adaptive and personalized control. So what are the benefits of human-centric lighting? Why would we even really want it in this space? I think we've kind of covered actually the majority of these things listed here, but overall, trying to have the best of both worlds, like I mentioned before, really getting rid of that glare and heat gain while also taking advantage of that natural light at the window. We're providing that personal control that I mentioned before, and I already said as well that employees really value that access to daylight and views. This isn't anything new. The corner office is always something people have wanted, right? So moving right along, we can actually look at the sustainability benefits of human-centric lighting, or HCL as it's abbreviated in here as well. So overall, interior shading solutions can lower HVAC costs. In general, when I mentioned, these automated controls and things like that, we're also looking at saving energy with occupancy and vacancy sensing and with daylight harvesting, which if you're not familiar with that term, it's where the lights dim automatically in response to that natural daylight so that you're conserving as much energy as possible, right? And we can go as far as receptacle control that is tied also to the occupancy and vacancy sensors. Those get switched off as well. So there's a lot of different options to actually reduce the amount of energy and reduce the footprint of the building when we're looking at these systems that are designed around the human experience. Basically, the most important thing is enabling the occupants to use only the light that they need, right? That's going to be the most sustainable way to do things. If a light's not needed, it's turned off, right? So just something to remember moving forward as well. Now, the business benefits of human-centric lighting, I think the most important part of this slide, yes, you will have energy savings. We just talked about that. You are going to have energy savings with this, but more importantly, you're going to have increased productivity from your workers. So there are tons of studies out there. There's one specifically by the California Energy Commission, that studied natural daylight and access to natural daylight with the productivity of workers. And it showed that worker performance increased by up to 18%, which is huge. And the reason that that's so important, our productivity and our activity throughout the day and how much we work and how well we work in the space, is because overall, a business spends the most money on its people, right? Lutron has this thing called the 330-300 rule. 3 is $3 a square foot of a commercial building on average is what's spent for energy for the entire year, $3 a square foot of the building. Okay, so your lighting, your HVAC, et cetera, right? We spend $3 per square foot. Now you spend $300 per square foot on your people on average in a commercial building per year. So when you look at those two numbers, right, it's great that I have 60% energy savings, but 60% of $3 isn't nearly as much as saving just 2% or let's say 3% on your productivity number, right? So it's a much larger piece of the pie when it comes to the dollar value of savings. If you make your people more productive, that's overall going to save you a lot more money than if we turned off your building for the entire year, right? Which would be extremely energy efficient because it wouldn't be using any energy. So that's the big chunk that's really important when you look at the business benefits of human-centric lighting. Making your people happy and perform well saves you a lot of money in the long run, right? There's also an element of employee recruitment and retention, which is the one thing I didn't mention on here as well. Like I said, millennials' #1 request is access to daylight and views. I know when I walk into a very innovative space that just has a lot of wow factors, beautiful windows. I mean, it has a level of, oh, I'm impressed, right? And that's one of the important things as well, is when you recruit employees, you recruit quality people, and that can be one of the added benefits. So we've talked a lot about what this is, why we care about it, right? How do we actually design it, right? How do we make all these things possible? So the #1 thing, and I feel like you guys could probably guess this before I even showed this slide, is implementing natural light wherever and whenever you can, right? Natural light is going to be the #1 thing. I know we all love the idea of circadian lighting and tunable white, which we'll talk about. But overall, you don't really need that as much, right? If you have access to the natural lighting outside right next to your desk, right? That suddenly all becomes almost unimportant, right? So access to natural light wherever possible is really going to be the first consideration, right? The first design consideration for human-centric lighting. And you'll notice in this picture, we actually have the Pantheon, which I always say is historically a great example of natural daylight in the space, right? Of really utilizing good daylighting design. Because of the oculus at the top of the Pantheon, the entire space is designed around daylighting, right? So just kind of keeping that in mind and keeping that element in mind whenever it comes to designing your building in general, having access to that natural daylight. The second thing is we optimize our floor plan, right? So the way that we design the building with our windows and all of the fenestration data for doors and everything else, we also have to consider the orientation and where we are in the world, right? Because in Louisiana and in Texas, glare and heat gain are a big deal, right? They're going to cost you a lot of money on the HVAC side if we don't take that into consideration. And we definitely don't want, glare directly in people's eyes whenever we're designing the system, because again, that turns into a negative experience, what we're trying to avoid. So really designing the floor plan according to the nuances of daylight is important as well, and considering the orientation of the building and things like that. We also want to think about how daylight connects with the electrical light. So we just talked about natural light basically are the first 2 steps of this whole designing a human-centric lighting project. But it's also important, this is actually our experience center in New York, we want to make sure my daylight is mimicking the natural lighting if this is our priority on the project, right? And the way that we can do that is with tunable white, which means we actually have light fixtures that change the color of the light anywhere across from, a bright, think about the old LEDs that were all bright white blue and kind of obnoxious with how bright they were, all the way up to, candle lit, sort of orange colored, warmer temperature and dim light. right? The ability to both dim, and this is a very important part of tunable white that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. It's not just the color. We definitely want that color consistency, and we want to be able to go across that spectrum that I mentioned throughout the day, but we also want to be able to adjust the dimming. So, you know, I'm not sitting in a bright orange light that's at full blown 100% light output, right? Because suddenly that doesn't feel like candlelight, it feels like we're preparing for Halloween, right? So dimming is very important when it comes to the circadian lighting and tunable white aspect as well. And that's what she's showing here in this picture is we get to that warm yellow, almost orange candlelit color as you dim down to make it feel like, okay, it's the evening, we're starting to wind down a little bit, I'm a little bit more relaxed. But in the mornings and maybe like mid-morning at noon, outside it's really bright in the sky, right? So we want it to be more like that. We want it to be energizing in the space. We want to have a high light output and have more of that leaning towards that whiter or almost blue light, right? So being able to mimic that with the electric light is very important. And diffusing light is just as important as letting it in. I already mentioned a few times now, there are some things about daylight that we don't really care for, right? Particularly where we live. So making sure that we have a solution there to really optimize our daylighting as much as possible, and having those motorized shades again is a very important component of this human-centric design. You can get WELL building credits based off of this, and actually if anyone is interested in seeing it, Delos, the company that developed this WELL business standard, actually has one of our systems installed, and they talk about how we can help you meet WELL standards. So, and we'd be more than happy to share that with you. But these are the specific buckets, I always call them buckets, if you will, of the points that we can get you with human-centric lighting specifically. So WELL has an entire section that's based off of lighting, right? And we can help you achieve every single one of these on this list, okay? And just by taking some of the human-centric design considerations we talked about, you can achieve this. So that's another value add as well for your business, is that you can help achieve the WELL standard in addition to just making the space better for everyone that's going to be in it. So overall, you want to engage with everyone you can, right? We want to make sure that, you know, we understand the customer priorities. They may not want or need tunable white in multiple locations, right? We may only need just static white and meeting code and maybe some dimming in some areas, right? That may be all we need in some areas, and then maybe in a wow space like a lobby, maybe we need a little bit more. Maybe we need to kick that up a notch and maybe get a little bit fancier with the design. The idea here is that we can customize this to be whatever the customer needs. And that's really what human-centric design and human-centric lighting is all about, is understanding the customer priorities and making them happen, right? So that conversation is very important. Of course, we want to hit your budget. That's always going to be the question. And that's always the question I receive after the CEU typically. All right, so how much does all that stuff cost that you were just talking about, right? So we know it's a real concern, it always will be. So making sure, again, that we're actually designing the system around that budget and around those customer priorities, and that's kind of the whole point of the human-centric lighting goal. And then we want to align any of the decision makers to make sure that you guys have a seamless experience. And that's going to be, of course, the lighting designer, architect, electrical engineer. A lot of times it's also the interior designer when we're looking at the shading solutions and different keypads and those aesthetics as well. So maybe making sure that all those players are aligned, that we get you the budget numbers you need, that everyone understands exactly what we're trying to achieve to make sure you guys really have an undramatic project process, right? And overall, making sure these decisions are prioritized early so that if there are any issues, if we are over budget, you know, et cetera, we can address them as soon as possible and get them fixed so that they don't become headaches later on. And then overall, making sure that the fixtures and controls meet whatever sequence of operations that we're trying to build. Overall, designing for natural light, there's a specific spatial daylight autonomy standard with IES. It's LM 83 for daylighting design. That kind of breaks this down if you were interested in looking at that. And then we also have, of course, we want to have that shading selection and the lighting selection where daylight does end, maybe we want that tunable white to kick in some spaces, right? And then the shading selection as well, we've already talked about how important it is to have shades, but when we're looking at picking fabric for shades, we have to look at the properties of the fabric, not just the color. And the reason for that is the shade is there to do a job, right? And different colors and different densities, right, or openness factors, how transparent that fabric is going to affect how it performs in the window and whether or not we have glare or whether or not we're saving energy with heat gain. So there are some additional considerations to make as we dive into each of these specific strategies. So how do we tunable white? That's a big question that we always get, and we actually have almost an entire CEU dedicated to, it's called How Good is Good is Good Enough, and it's LED light sources, and we talk about all these different things. But without going too much into the weeds, right, ultimately the optimal solution for tunable white would recreate the feeling of natural light basically following the sun, right? That would be our optimal tunable white scenario. We want to create that connection to the outdoors and have that indoor CCT aligned with what's happening outside. You also may want to make sure that your different lighting is enhancing different features of the space. Of course, we want to make considerations for if there's artwork in the space. Maybe there's a decorative fixture we want to use and we want to make sure that it's going to integrate correctly. There's some other considerations to be made there. But something to remember with tunable white, and you guys probably won't get into this as much, but it does matter how we're actually controlling that tunable white, not just that the fixture can do tunable white. So something to remember is just because a fixture can do tunable white doesn't mean that it's going to perform that well in the space, depending on what type of lighting controls you actually attach to that fixture. And there's different control strategies when it comes to dimming. Most common is 0 to 10 volt. And whenever we look at tunable white with 0 to 10 volt dimming, we do start to get into some complicated scenarios and some issues with the quality of the dimming. So typically, when we're looking at a tunable white solution, we want to go with a digital dimming strategy rather than 0 to 10 volt because it performs miles better. And it also overall just has fewer headaches for the contractor on site as well. It's a much simpler solution to wire up. So that is something to consider when we were looking at that tunable white technology specifically. Whenever we're designing quality light, and I know I already mentioned we have a CEU completely dedicated to this, so I don't want to, bog down too much in the weeds with you guys. But just a couple of things to remember: we want good color rendering. A CRI of over 90 equals pretty good color rendering. Something else to consider is warm dim. So what warm dim is if you think about an incandescent light, when we dim it down, it starts to naturally get warmer as it gets dimmer, right? So it starts to turn into that more orangey color as it gets more dim. With LEDs, that doesn't naturally occur, right? So something to consider whenever we're looking at dimming LEDs is, does it have warm dim? Is it able to change from that bright white light at 100% as you dim it down to 5%? Does it get warmer just like that candlelight effect and that incandescent light bulb effect of dimming? And then deep dimming, right? We call this architectural dimming, down to 0.1%. If you've ever had LEDs and dimmers installed in your home or in your office space, this was very common whenever LEDs first started coming out and everyone started replacing their light bulbs and they still had their older dimmers on the wall, regardless of what kind of dimmers they were. And some of the LEDs might crackle and pop. You might not get down, you get down to what should be 20% and they just pop off, or it takes a while for them to actually pop on when you start dimming them up. They don't turn on until your dimmer is already at 50% or something like that. They've had issues with buzzing, different things like that, or that you've had problems with LEDs. Some of you may have had those problems at home, but we want to make sure that your light sources are capable of dimming continuously and you don't have any of those issues at all on the control side. This is another detail specifically for color changing fixtures and tunable white. The graph you see on the right, we call that little U-shaped piece the color space, and that black line there is called the black body curve. So the black body curve is basically that tunable white spectrum I mentioned, right? It goes from that blue up to that candlelight kind of orange color. And that's what we're typically trying to follow when we're talking about circadian lighting and trying to mimic the natural daylight outside. The natural daylight that's outside follows that curve, more or less. Whenever we are looking at the new TM 3018 standard, which you may or may not have seen before, they have some different color considerations, right? The first one is good color fidelity. So over an RF value of 85. So what that is referencing is that, and the RG level and the RC level there, this CRI over 90 number doesn't really take into consideration the fact that LEDs typically don't or may not render red very well, because it was developed long enough ago that we were still looking at incandescent light sources, and incandescent light sources automatically render reds and oranges really well. Like there's not really any issues with that. They naturally do that. LEDs don't have that natural effect. So while you could have a high CRI, some of your other red colors, right, some of the different nuanced colors of red may not actually be rendered that well. And so these RF, RG, and RCS data points that are on this slide help to overcome that, is really what it is. And you can be guaranteed that you're going to render all of those colors in that spectrum very well if you meet these different minimum requirements. For color gamut as well as chroma shift. If you are looking for this TM30 data and you're like, okay, where do I find this? You may have to contact the manufacturer directly. Easiest way to do that is going to ask Charles, right? He'll be able to get you that data for any of the manufacturers that do publish it, right? Not everyone is required to publish that data, but most of the high quality LEDs do, right? So high CRI versus high vibrancy. So vibrancy is a setting of, we're actually mixing the white light in a different way to make certain colors pop. So the way I kind of explain it is if you're on Instagram or on Snapchat and you put a filter on there that kind of adds saturation to the colors, right? That's kind of what we do by mixing this white light differently. It gives the appearance of we're changing the saturation of the colors. So in this little GIF that's on here, or GIF, however you pronounce it, I'm sure is correct. The intensity of the light is not changing. So it's not dimming up and down. We're just shifting from no vibrancy to what we call high vibrancy or high CRI. So this would be an example of like 90 CRI, which is considered very good color rendering. But once we change it to that vibrancy setting, you'll notice how those flowers just pop, right? And that's the difference between vibrancy and high CRI. So something to consider is a light source that can do this vibrancy effect whenever we're talking about maybe some high-end retail spaces, artwork, anytime we're looking at, we've also seen it in bars and restaurants as well, when we're really trying to make the food on the plate just look amazingly delicious, right? We make those colors really pop with this vibrancy setting. So designing a connection to the outdoors, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think we've actually hit most of the things on this slide already. Basically, try to do as many windows as possible and make sure that everyone has access to those natural daylight and views, and make sure we're looking at the metrics, right? It's hard sometimes because we want to pick shades based on the color that looks the best in the space. And don't get me wrong, you do have to make that consideration because it's hanging in the window. People are going to see it, right? It has to work well with the space and the other design elements, but we also have to remember that it is there to do a job. So the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to figure out what our key design considerations are. What's most important is heat gain, reducing heat gain most important? Is it going to be reducing glare? Figure that out, and then we can narrow it down to a specific color palette and choose a color that's appropriate for the space from there, right? So just something to remember. Designing for adaptive control is very important. You'll notice she walked in and just pressed a button and the shade started to go down, and when she walked in, an occupancy sensor actually turned on those lights. So when we're looking at adaptive control, we also want to consider any integration needs that we might need in the space. So in healthcare in particular, A lot of times they want to integrate with either the nurse's station or maybe the pillow speaker, right? That's at the patient's bed. If you've seen it before, it's just a little keypad that they can control their lights and stuff. The TV remote's typically on there too. You know, do we need to have that level of integration? Do we need to have AV integration? And do we need to have HVAC integration, right? There's different ways we can integrate with HVAC. So just making sure we're keeping those considerations in mind so that they're not a surprise whenever we're already trying to install everything on site are important for this design to work as well. So overall, whenever we talk about personalized control, consider the user experience, right? The Pico that's actually on this desk, that's what we call it, that little remote that she's pressing. It's called a Pico remote. If I were to give that exactly how it's engraved there, natural, focus, relax, and off, to my mom, she would have no idea how to use it, right? That would not make sense to her. But just a button that had on, off with an arrow for raise and an arrow for lower on the keypad, that's something she would understand, right? So making sure we're designing the space for the people inside it, right? Because I personally, in my home, would like to have something similar to the Pico that's on this slide, but not everybody wants or needs that. So we have a variety of, I always say flavors, we have a variety of flavors to choose from, right? When it comes to any keypad aesthetic and engravings, etc. So whatever is most understandable to our clients, we can make sure we're labeling things clearly and it's something that they will immediately understand. And to me, personally, this is I know it seems very simple, but this is probably the most important thing about the human experience of lighting, is making sure that when we're putting all these smart systems and smart technology into buildings, it's great. But if I get in there and I can't operate it and I say, you know what, I throw my hands up, I'm done, give me a switch because I can't figure out how to operate this, you've completely missed the mark, right? So although this may seem very simple, make sure that we're considering this so that we don't later have to go back and turn off functionalities of a system that really can do so much, right? So how do we sell this, right? Who cares about what? And it kind of breaks it down into different people. I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time on this, but it is important to talk about, and it is important to talk about specifically because I think it helps to differentiate your business as well. So we have our different types of stakeholders and we go down into each one. So for people, right, I want to attract top talent. I want everyone to be productive. And HR, of course, wants everyone to be happy as well. So all of these considerations, there's a reason that the WELL building standard has a section on lighting, right? It's very important for the wellness of the people inside the building. And, you know, lighting, I feel like, is one of those things where if it's working correctly, no one notices it, right? But it's also one of those things that if it's working incorrectly, everyone will notice it, right? It's going to be something your lights are flickering up. If my lights were flickering above my head right now, I doubt I would be able to concentrate to present a presentation, right? So something to remember for whenever we're looking at, you know, the people in the building is this is definitely something that they care about. They may not know that they care about it, right? Because they may have had great experiences with it so far and have just been blessed. And they're like, okay, great. I didn't realize that this wasn't always what happened with my lighting in the space, right? But it is something that they'll definitely care about. For a business, right? How does this benefit them? I still think that there's a couple of things on here. And yes, we can help with WELL and LEED by designing a human-centric lighting building. We already talked about the sustainability that you can gain, as well as the increased, or as well as the WELL standards. So we can definitely help to meet those two standards. We can get some additional data. So occupancy data, for example, of, hey, I'm using X amount, I'm using, 3 conference rooms 40% of the time, but this boardroom is occupied 90% of the time. Maybe I need to make a second boardroom and convert 2 of those conference rooms, right? So data like that can help you make decisions. I still think the biggest thing, though, is going to be, what's my return on investment? It's going to be the productivity of your people, right? If I can tell you that you're going to save just 1%, right? You're just going to make your people 4 minutes a day more productive than they already are. We talked about it's $300, right, per square foot is what you spend on your people. If I improve by 1%, that's $3 a square foot that I'm saving, right? Now, if you remember, the energy total energy that you spend on your building is $3 a square foot, right? So again, it's small potatoes as compared to the productivity of your people and how much money you can save. And then overall, you're future-proofing your solution. So a lot of the stuff that I showed you and talked about are digital controls, wireless, touchless technology, which also means I can reconfigure the space very easily if I need to, right? Right now, that is so important, right? Flexibility for today is even more important, I feel like, at the moment than flexibility for tomorrow, because today, businesses are having to change so much because of the pandemic, right? We have to change the way that people interact. We have to change the way the space is laid out. We have to move desks further apart, et cetera. Your lighting overall is designed for a specific space. So if you have these super flexible control solutions, it's no problem. We can easily rezone without having to run any more wire or spend any more money. We just rezone and reprogram, and then there you go. You have your space is now adapted, right? But if we look at the old way of doing it, we might have to get into the ceiling and rewire, drop different switch legs, tear into things. People can't even be in the space while you're doing this, right? So that adaptability and that flexibility of these systems is also very, very important for this human-centric lighting concerns, and it's something that the business part of this conversation is really going to appreciate, I think, especially given our current situation. And the building, right? So if we're talking to building managers, facility managers, I need to be able to change, right? As the space needs to change. I also need something that saves energy. And I want something, quite frankly, that I don't have to screw with very often, right? I want something that's very easy to use. It's running by itself for the most part, and maybe it lets me know if something is wrong, right? So if something is going wrong, like maybe I have a low battery, maybe a driver isn't working correctly, whatever it may be, if I could get alerts and tell me exactly where that problem is, that makes their life even better, right? So that's really going to be the most important things when we're addressing the needs of the building itself. So we do have a case study published of the ASID headquarters in Washington, D.C. I've actually toured that space. It's beautiful. And it's the first LEED and WELL Platinum certified building. So it's a perfect example of human-centric lighting, right? Basically, if you're designing to meet the needs for LEED and WELL, and we're doing it correctly, you've got a human-centric lighting design, right? So all the features of this particular project include tunable white, daylighting. They do have automated shading as well. And they have a sequence of operations defined to make sure we're going with the natural progressions of the sun. What I mean by that, right, is whenever we're talking about, hey, let's get our customer priorities, we also want to talk about how can we develop a sequence of operations to work for them, right? Because we can put it on a default system and then tweak it later. But the best system is one that we install and it just works. So that sequence of operations and getting into the details is actually very important if we want that space to just run smoothly as soon as it's installed. So overall, the results, right? They've actually reduced their lighting bill by 80%, which I think is very impressive, especially considering that LEDs themselves are already really efficient. So the fact that they've reduced their lighting bill by 80% on top of that is quite impressive. And overall, they, based off of their calculations, right, and they did a variety of different metrics, is indicated what they will actually recoup, right? Their return on investment is going to be within 5 years, right? So remember, they have, again, tunable white, they have daylighting, they have automated shading, they have an entirely automated system in there. And they've estimated that their return on investment is within 5 years. Which, you know, based on what I've seen, most people would find that agreeable, right? So to sum it all up, I think we're doing pretty good on time, actually. The 4 pillars of human-centric lighting to remember: quality light, connection to the outdoors, natural light, and that personalized and adaptive control. We hit each of these 4 pillars, we've achieved a human-centric lighting design, right? And I just want to end with, I think it's very important to note, although we did talk about some, I would say, very fancy systems today and different capabilities that we can do and all the really cool stuff, Remember that we can hit these 4 pillars with our simple systems as well, right? If I want to have a connection to the outdoors, I can also do a manual shade if that's what the project needs, right? We can still have that connection to the outdoors and that diffused light. If we're looking at quality light, right? I want to make sure that I'm connecting it to the, even if we're just doing a standalone dimmer, all I want is a wired in dimmer in the wall. Let's make sure that we have the correct one that's going to give you the best dimming possible, right? Even if it's just right there. So whenever we're looking at this, remember that human-centric design considerations can be made for any size project, any budget project, and it doesn't have to have color changing. It doesn't have to have tunable white. These are kind of the epitome of human-centric lighting design whenever we're talking about all these really neat features like that. And they are very impressive. But you can still consider human-centric lighting even without all of those extra bells and whistles, right? It's as simple as a room with a dimmer that dims properly. You've already elevated the human experience in that room, right? Because before it was just switching on and off. So just that's my final piece of takeaway information for the human-centric lighting design. I do have a short video, but I wanted to pause for any questions. And I don't know, Erin and Lauren, if y'all have had any come in that you want me to try to answer real quick, or if we're just gonna look at everything a little bit later.
No questions in so far, but sometimes it takes folks a moment or two to kind of process and turn those into question form. So if you want to show your video, we'll see if anything comes in.
That sounds perfect. All right. So I'm actually going to turn off my little streaming video because sometimes with the bandwidth, it doesn't work as well. So bear with me. And just let me know if there are any issues with the video playing for anyone.
Introducing Athena, the all-in-one lighting and shading solution that brings the magic of light to everyday moments. Athena powers next-level lighting experiences for a broad variety of applications, whether intimate restaurants, boutique hotels, and a host of other work and lifestyle spaces. Athena integrates natively with Ketra, the world's most advanced light source. Extend natural light seamlessly into your space, or saturate with color. And easily design with any light source in one system. Whether your space requires energizing light, warm, dim light, natural light, a nuance of vibrancy, or saturated color, easily design with Ketra and any other light source right at your fingertips. With integrated dynamic shading, perfectly balanced daylight with interior light. Our iOS app makes lighting design and customization easier than ever. A variety of powerful controls make Athena accessible and natural to control. Athena works for architectural spaces of any size and makes it simple to realize your vision from one single solution. Create transformative scenes that change over time. Now, you can let the story of your space play out, and it's all brought to life by Athena.
All right, so that's our newest system that we just launched called Athena. And the reason I wanted to share it with you, and I think it's probably pretty, it's pretty intuitive just looking at the video, that it's very easy to design a human-centric lighting system with this new Athena platform. And if you're not familiar with Lutron, we do have multiple tiered commercial systems that Charles and I can help you get to the correct level of human-centric design that we actually want for the space. We may not need Athena. We may be okay with a different type of solution, but Athena meets some amazing needs in the market, whether we're looking at retail, higher education, healthcare, hospitality, I mean, you name it. So I just wanted to share that with you and please let me know if you guys ever need anything. And Erin, I don't know if any questions came in while the video was playing, but.
No, we did get a couple of comments. It seems like people have really appreciated your presentation, so bravo.
That's great.
I'll just take one moment to do a plug for some of our upcoming events. We have Storytelling with Trey Trahan coming up on this Friday, and then next Friday we are featuring Melissa Rome in that ongoing Storytelling with Architects series. So we definitely encourage everyone here to join us for those. They're free and open to the public. And also want to make sure that everyone visits our website, aineworleans.org. Be sure to register for all of our upcoming events there. And Carson at Lutron and Charles with Bell McCoy, thank you so much for this presentation today.
Thank you, Erin. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Charles, for setting it up. And thank you, Lauren, as well.
Yes, thank you all both. And Carson, I appreciate you dropping in and doing the presentation for everyone.
Happy to be here. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week.
Yes, y'all too. Everyone take care and we'll see you soon.